Two. Welcome back. This is the deeper dive version of 26 Minutes with. We're with a wonderful woman who has a passion for youth justice, and social change. And that's Jody Yaa Dunn. She knows her stuff, and we're talking about youth justice and what needs to change and shift. And Jody, we've identified, several issues, of course, within the school system, the historic systemic racism that's been around for years, and and then also certain viewpoints that people have on Black or youth or other ethnicities that are at risk, the fear they have around it. My first question to in this deeper dive segment is this: what are some other systemic issues within the youth justice system that we need to be addressing? Because I'm sure there's a few more than just what we've touched on so far.
For sure. So we're going through an interesting time right now in terms of youth justice. I'll just speak in terms of Toronto, right? So previously there was multiple courthouses for young people, and we now have a mega courthouse downtown where everybody will come from across the city for the most part, for their appearances and hearings and things like that, right? So that's definitely a big change when we look at some of the issues around accessibility. We know it's a nightmare to get across the city at any time of day.
Yeah.
And so that was one major point that came up when the ministry announced that they were going to be building this courthouse. Right away, youth workers said, "Oh my gosh, how is my young person from Port Union going to get downtown for a 9 o'clock court date?" Right? But the interesting thing is a lot of these things are happening online now, thanks to COVID, right? So I guess when I look at the youth justice system and what else could we do differently, one of the biggest challenges I would say is around the ministry and how youth justice operates. So when a young person goes through the court system, youth diversion is to be offered unless it's a serious charge, which, for example, would be drug possession or weapons. Those things, and there's a few others, don't qualify for youth diversion. But otherwise, when a young person is facing charges, the court is really to provide an opportunity to say, how do we provide this young person a second chance? What resources might we recommend that they get tapped into? And what are we going to ask of them in order to remove these charges? And that's where diversion comes into play. So a very common one, which most people know, is volunteer service. Okay, you've done this crime, right? We're going to ask that you volunteer at Salvation Army or another local organization, Boys and Girls Club, for 30 hours, right? But another act of diversion can be that the court will mandate for young people to go through specific programs. The challenge there is within youth diversion, there are fee-for-service programs. And so when the young person is referred, they often look to their list for who the fee-for-service providers are with the ministry. Many of those fee-for-service providers are not culturally responsive. They often don't have an in-depth knowledge of the day-to-day challenges that the young people that they work with might be facing and how to support them in terms of navigating that.
Yeah.
And then the third challenge is that there are some amazing grassroots organizations in our city, and they're the ones that are often most closely connected to young people already and the families in our communities. But they won't receive those diversion referrals because they're not on the fee-for-service list, right? And the challenge with that list is that they do rolling renewals. So every year you have the same organizations get the funding year after year after year. And then the interesting thing is the organizations that are on that list, they often sub-refer out to another organization that can actually do the work. But that other organization doesn't receive the money. So it's something that most people aren't aware of, because if you don't work within the system, you're often not aware that this is happening.
It's almost like there needs to be a meritocracy approach, like base it on merit, not on money, and yeah, that's really that's a bit mind-boggling. I found when I went to, that young man I was talking about, that I had that encounter with years ago.
Yes.
And I went to his bail hearing and to support him. And I just found the whole system, the court system, and his mother had to come up with $5,000 for bail.
Yeah,
She didn't have it. There's no way. She lives, just
yeah.
Jane Finch area. She, single mom working, whatever,
Mhm.
and trying to start a business. So the bail money,
Yeah.
then the legal aid system was I found it just a bit of a joke. And this is me like way younger. Like I was in my, I don't know, mid 40s then, and or early 40s, and I just found it just the system's like broken, man. Like,
Yeah. We often refer to the justice system as a beast. It's this beast that you have to navigate. And even for myself, that has primarily worked in youth justice, it's difficult, right? If you don't know the right people to talk to get your way through it, you often end up kind of with the short end of the deal, right? Um, Working at 311 Jarvis, they're very it was refreshing to see how the majority of the staff operated within that space, meaning that I was able to build relationships with the Crown, with probation, with the bail program. And the majority of the folks in that space genuinely cared for the young people that came through those doors. Often the Crown would say to me, Jody, can I ask you a quick question? This young person, I know they're coming from Malvern. It just doesn't make sense to have them come downtown for the program. What would you recommend? Right? And I say, oh, here's the top 3 organizations, here's their phone numbers, because I had those relationships, right? But if you don't have that knowledge, it doesn't look like that. And if that young person doesn't have somebody supporting them to help navigate it, they don't get that opportunity, right?
mm,
Even around legal aid, knowing and having access to that information to say, yes, I'm having legal aid, but I'd like to request this lawyer. And I know this lawyer is on the legal aid list, and I know that they're an amazing lawyer, right? So a lot of it is around education. How do we provide preventative education and also make sure that young people and parents and caregivers have access to this information well in advance so that, God forbid, if you're there, you can say, you know what, this is who I need to call. This is how I'll get the information that I need.
and is there maybe a portal or a website or anything in place to point people in the right direction, especially in a time of need when you're stressed, and in fear and wondering how do I navigate the beast? Is there anything?
Yeah, there's a number of organizations. There are some organizations which are now ministry funded that are culturally responsive. Delta Family Resource Center, they're an organization that folks can reach out to. And there's others as well, but I'd say that it really depends on the community that you're in, right? Harriet Tubman Community Organization, they're across from Fairview Mall. So there's definitely pockets across the city, and these are spaces where I feel confident in saying to folks, you may not get services there, but they'll make sure you get to where you need to, right? And a part of that comes from just being able to navigate and understand kind of who's out in community and who's doing the good work versus who's making their statistics look like they're working, but they're not.
Right. I know it's all about numbers.
Yep.
What are some cases you worked on, Jody, that turned out well? What happened? What worked?
Oh gosh.
Like one that
You know,
comes
the young
to,
people I've worked with over the years.
but is there one like maybe that comes to mind? Like,
Let's see. It's funny because sometimes I'll be out on the street and somebody will come up to me and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, Jody," and I always forget names, so I feel terrible, but I never forget their face. And so I'll say, "Oh my gosh, remind me, when did we last see each other?" Right? To help jog my memory. And they'll say, "Yo, you supported me when I was going through this, and this is where I am now." I think that above anything else, I love when people come up to me years later and they say, "You know what? I just wanted to let you know I took in everything that we spoke about. And maybe it seemed like I wasn't listening or I wasn't hearing you, but I heard everything you said. And I still hear your voice when I'm making decisions." I love to hear that because I know the impact was there. But there's a few things that stand out to me. I think one would be working at 311 Jarvis. Part of the restorative justice approach that we did was providing young people an opportunity to share their experience back with the court, right? So when they would go to their final court date, they would have to present, what have you learned from the experience, right? Um, how was this a good use of your time to be involved with this program for 6 months or whatever it was? And when I talk about 311 Jarvis being innovative, our young people did drawings, they did sketches, they did canvas paintings, they wrote poetry, short stories, you name it. But whatever it was that they chose to be the fuel to explain their journey, right? And one thing, one of the stories that always stands out to me is I had a young person that was a musical artist, and he went into the studio and he recorded a song and he saved it on a USB. And I had to walk that over to the Crown's office. And I said, "Here's the final report from the young person." She's like, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, he's put this together." And she said, "No problem." She listened to it and she ended up saving it. She printed it out and she put it up on her wall for inspiration, right? So it's how do we really look at providing those spaces for young people that make sense for them,
Yeah.
right? Around voicing their thoughts and their opinions and their experiences.
Yeah. And I wonder if that path, that journey is leading to like youth entrepreneurs be
Mhm.
more creative and expressive in their businesses too. It's just like, I think we need to tell our story. We need to communicate, because if we keep it bottled in, it doesn't end well. That's where health issues happen. That's
Yep.
where anger happens. That's where violence happens.
Yep.
Do you have hope in all this work you've done that things will improve one day?
100% because I've been able to see the improvements myself, just in terms of my own journey, right? I talked about even my experience of working in Malvern and how our engagement with young people looked very differently to what it looks like today, right? Um, and so it's baby steps. And don't get me wrong, it's very frustrating. And some days I just think, oh my gosh, like this is ridiculous. But it's the positive outcomes that I see that continues to push the work that I do, personally speaking.
How do you manage yourself and your emotions in
Hmm.
this kind of work?
Yeah.
You're so well spoken and so well versed and so knowledgeable and so heart centered. How do you manage your own process? Like, who do you go to for support?
Yeah, well, I mentioned young people and the importance of mentorship,
Mhm.
and I think it's the same for myself and others that work in the field. I definitely have a core support of folks from my community that work in the community that we have shared experiences and we're able to unpack, right? So when we talk about providing spaces for young people, you can't do this work and not take time to unpack what we do as well. And I know when we talk about hopelessness versus hope and how things have shifted, when I started doing this work, trauma informed was not a part of our language. It was very much come in but don't talk about your personal life. We don't want to hear about it. Leave that at the door, right? And there wasn't really much talk around, oh, you just supported a team of staff that supported a group of young people that just lost one of their peers to gun violence. How are you doing? Right? That wasn't much of a conversation where now I find a lot of organizations are very purposeful around providing those spaces for their staff, around self care. Uh, Another thing is around taking time for self, right? So if you work in the field, calling in and saying, you know what, I need a mental health day and being unapologetic about it. That's it. No questions asked. And a lot of organizations, they support that. 10 years ago, not so much, right?
Yeah.
Um, I remember going into work sick as a dog, stressed out, and that was what was expected. Give your all for community, but meanwhile, like your family is suffering and you're suffering, right?
Yeah.
So there's been a number of major changes, I would say.
Uh, 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 the last topic I want to get to, and it's from the documentary
Mhm.
School to Pipeline. Um, and one of the more effective alternatives to custody for young offenders is mentorship.
Yep.
And we talked about it, a lot today in our
Mhm.
chat. The community coming together to take care of one another.
Yeah.
And one thing that comes to mind is the Adinkra farm in Barrie is a really good case in point. Do you want to just share like that story, because that really stood out for me. You know, it was a dream and vision of her husband, who was a reggae musician back in the 70s here in the GTA, and now it's finally come to fruition. What do you like about that model?
Yeah, so on a personal note, I've been to a Dinker farm many times. My children have attended summer camp there. So a Dinker farm, and hopefully, folks will watch the documentary and get more of a background story. But a Dinker farm ultimately was created by a Black couple from Toronto that have both worked in community and in social services for many years, raising a family. And they recognize that many children that grow up in the city, particularly racialized children, they don't leave the city, right? And this has changed. Like, this is pre-COVID, right?
Hmm.
Not leaving the city. And I've witnessed it firsthand where young people from the East End going past Yorkdale wasn't even a thought, right? Never mind leaving the concrete jungle to actually go out and reconnect with nature, right? So when we talk about how do we connect with our spiritual being, how do we do that if we're not able to connect with nature on a regular basis, right? And so that was really the concept behind a Dinker Farm, without speaking for them, was how do we provide spaces where our community can reconnect with nature and have that opportunity to self-reflect and to rebuild and all of those things.
That's really important, and I think that connection with the earth. We're so tech
Mhm.
savvy. We have to like let the tech go.
Yep.
Go hug a tree. Go for a nature trail walk. Whatever. Like just go and or journal. Take your book and write notes. And as you sit under a tree in a chair, really important. How
Yeah.
then can we reverse the programming that our youth and even us adults go through, from cultural bias to the media, which incites violence in the music, in sports, and this and stereotyping in film and television? How do we begin to reverse all that programming that we've been fed?
Hmm. When we were looking at the research project around anti-Black racism across the province,
Hmm.
we kept referring to the word reimagine.
Mm.
So for us, that was important because, being trauma informed, we want to say, of course, we definitely need to acknowledge not only what we've gone through, but what our ancestors have gone through, right? Which is a part of our being and who we are
Sure.
and why we're in the environment that we're in, right?
Yeah.
But reimagining allows us to then take a step to the side and say, okay, this is where I've come from. This is what I would like to take with me. And let's move forward in this way. So we often say to young people, if you could reimagine your current situation, it's not saying that everything's negative, right? But if you could reimagine, what would you do differently for yourself? Or where would you like to see yourself? And allowing them the opportunity to vision and then to believe in that vision and say, okay, here's your vision. Let us as professionals now pour into you so that you can utilize your skills and resources, right? A lot of times in community, youth workers like to be Superman. I'm going to come in and save the day and bring everything you need. And I'm here in the trenches to help you. Call me 24/7. And that's just not realistic.
Mm-mm.
It's not healthy for the youth worker. It's not healthy for the young person. What we want to say is, here's your community. Let me help you connect with these different pillars that you have so that you don't only call Jody, you can call David, you can see Chris, there's Esther, there's all these places that you can go. You already have your toolkit. I'm just here to remind you what's inside of it, right?
I love it. And talking about reimagine,
Hmm.
my last question. It's 1 year from now. What change would you love to see happen?
Mm,
Re,
gosh.
re, yeah, we wave your magic wand and poof, what happened this time?
To be honest with you, I mean, the question might change tomorrow because there's so many things that I would like to, put energy into. But for me, I would really like to see more supports around mental health. The reason that I'm speaking about that is I don't, when we talk about trauma, we just got out of a major pandemic. Um, and I think we're starting to see some of the aftermath of that within our
Hmm.
classrooms,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I think that there is just not I think, I know the resources aren't there, right? So they were there, the need was there before, and it's 100% more now. Because, you talk about young people being able to disengage from their electronics. That's an addiction,
Hmm.
right? And that has gone substantially up because of being locked away from everybody for the past couple of years. So I would love to see more resources, financial resources around mental health within our policing, right? So that that could curb some of the challenge that we have within our communities right now. Policing is not a method that has been proven to work, but we know that those that are social workers that are qualified around mental health and wellness practices, being trauma informed, all of these things, that's what we need on our streets right now.
Yeah. You raised a few good points here in this last, bit, the importance of a vision,
Mhm.
that, a youth worker doesn't have to be superhero or super youth worker. It's they've just got to be able to coach and guide, and not save the day, because then you're not allowing the young people you're serving the opportunity to learn and develop for themselves, right?
Exactly.
That's we want to you provide an environment where we can help them
Mhm.
do it for themselves. And that's why I think mentoring and the Adinkra Farm example is a beautiful
Yep.
example. Jody, this has been an honor. Last, again, where do we connect with you? This is, yeah, I think you're going to be a woman to watch in the next few years. I really do.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to connect today. In terms of folks that are interested in reaching out to me, my email is info@jodyyaaconsulting.com. And my Instagram is Jody_Yaa. That's JODY_YAA.
What a joy, and just keep well and keep up the amazing work.
Thank you.
Again, for those watching, this has been the Deeper Dive segment of 26 Minutes With. Again, it's the show that honors those who are leading, making an impact, and creating positive change on the planet and locally. Next week, our guest is going to be Gregory Johnson, who is an American war vet. And he's going to share a story of from pain to purpose and what he's doing now. So that's going to be really interesting conversation with him. If you like it, if you like us, click like, share it, comment. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody. Stay well.